If you were here 5 or 6 years ago, you know I told this story, and I'll tell it again, though it's terribly embarrassing. I hate this series because I have to tell all my bad sins to illustrate it, to make it work. But I moved here to start the church as a young man, having graduated with my bachelor's from Vanderbilt and my master's and my doctorate from Asbury Seminary. And in my 20s, I had, I'd made a bit of a name for myself through my preaching gift. I'd won some preaching awards at seminary, and I was getting nice invitations here and there. And so I figured when God called me to start the new church here, that it was all going to rise and fall on my preaching gifts. And I just figured, well, that just makes sense. That's why he's given me those gifts anyhow. And we weren't just but 2 or 3 or 4 months into this journey, this adventure of starting the church, before my friend, a pastor in Austin, his name's Matt Carter, called me, and he said, hey, there's a guy who's coming your way, and he's just going to graduate here in a week or two, and you should hire him. I'm telling you, he's really, really good. So I called him up, and we got to know each other, and I ended up hiring him for a pittance of a salary, but he took the job because he had no money. Well, I had no money really either, so we were even. And he needed a job, and I needed someone to help me. His name was Ben Stewart. I bet you've heard of him. And after he'd been here a couple of months, I said, hey, why didn't you preach on a Sunday? I figured, well, it'll just give me a chance to hear what you've got, and afterwards, I was like, wow, Ben, I think God may have put a gift of preaching inside of you. That was really good. You haven't even been to seminary. But I know everybody can have beginner's luck. I figured, well, lightning can't strike twice. But let's try it. And so I put him up again, and he crushed it again. And I was thrilled, genuinely. I felt like a dad so proud because he was watching his son throw a touchdown pass. It was just, I was thrilled to think, wow, God, you really brought me somebody that's very, very good. This is awesome. And over time, I noticed that after the early service over at the Kleb Intermediate School in the cafetorium, that the parents of the youth, they would go into the choir room, standing room only. They'd hug the walls of the choir room where their kids were for their youth service, and they'd go in to hear a second sermon. But I figured, well, you're just doing that because the boy needs support, and your kids, you can't leave until they're done, so you're just enduring a second sermon. Until one day a lady came out, and she said to me, Ken, you did really well today. That was good. But I'm telling you, you need to get a recording of what Ben just preached down there. Now that was amazing. And I'm thinking, you did not need to say that. Sometimes you should just think it, don't say it. And honestly, I was thinking, why do you endure 2 sermons? Nobody needs 2 sermons in one day. One is enough. Your cup runneth over when I was done. You didn't need to go and endure a second sermon, for crying out loud. I was putting in my hardest work, and yet this young man was starting to steal my thunder. And just like that, the mention of his name didn't make me so happy anymore. Now it made me feel frustrated. And then one night in the privacy of the 3rd floor apartment where I lived as a single guy back then, I was lying on the bed, I remember, when the thought crossed my mind, I really need to help Ben move on. I need to give him a graceful exit ramp and help him feel freed up for his future. I thought that I was all alone. Unbeknownst to me, the Spirit of the Lord had come into that room, totally uninvited. And just as clear as I'm standing here looking at you right now, I could see in my mind's eye that scene in the Old Testament where King Saul can stand no longer tolerating any of young David who was going to succeed him. And he took his spear and he threw it at David while David was playing the harp for him. And I sensed the whisper of the Holy Spirit say to my spirit, even in that moment, are you going to be like Saul and throw spears at young Ben and get rid of him? Or are you going to humble yourself and love him like Saul's son Jonathan loved David, lifting him up, encouraging him, befriending him, mentoring him, and being for him like a brother or a father that he didn't have. And I remembered in that spear-throwing incident where Saul threw his spear at David. After that, God's hand never again rested on Saul with blessing. Oh, I'm telling you, that was the night I was wrestling. I was trying every way to slither my way out of the headlock that I knew God had me in, because I had a script. I wanted that script to be the script that counted. I wanted to be the star. And the Lord landed another punch right then, and I sensed him say to my spirit, the trajectory of your ministry will be marked from this day forward by the choice you make tonight. Will you be Saul, or will you be David? Or will you be Jonathan? By this point, I was crying, really because I was mad. I was mad because I hadn't even invited God over that evening. I just wanted to be alone and have my own thoughts. I was mad because God was forming in me the reality of what I was becoming, and was casting for me a vision of something new that I hadn't signed up for. And I was mad because I knew I had to do what he wanted me to do. And I was crying and sitting there pouting. But after a while, I noticed something was happening. My tears turned warm from cold. And there was a cleansing in my spirit as he was working in my heart to get that gunk out, as I began repenting. And this cleansing, I don't know, it just sort of came over me, this sense of washing. And it was as if the tentacles of that beast of envy were getting pried open from clutching my heart. And in the moments that followed, God gave me a new vision, a new script, a new narrative, a new story for my life. Not anymore was it going to be, this will be the church that was built on Ken's preaching gift, but he gave me what I call my balcony vision. The whole concept that I would move to the balcony and that I would work the rest of my life to grow fruit on the trees of other people through their gifts and through their talents and through their abilities, which I would nurture and foster and mentor and help develop. There's a brand new vision for me. And ever since that night, I have been able to celebrate every good thing that God has brought to Ben. And now Donna and their children, the new church up in D.C. now, and I count him as one of my dearest, most dependable, trustworthy confidants, brothers, partners in the gospel.